Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining the ScienceOpen webinar, Increase Your Research Impact with Better Metadata. Just a short introduction, I'm Stephanie Dawson, head of ScienceOpen, a discovery environment with over 67 million records for articles, books, chapters, and more. Some of those articles have a rich set of information available, such as abstracts, references, citations, and author affiliations. Those articles are deeply networked within our discovery environment and are viewed more often than articles that have only a very minimal set of information. Today, I would like to explain to you how this rich metadata affects the discoverability and, in the long run, the impact of your research. So let's start with the basic unit of discoverability, the Digital Object Identifier, or DOI. A DOI is a stable identifier that links to the article or book homepage, or URL. And as URLs tend to change over time, publishers update their website, change platforms, or journals are bought and sold or move, a DOI is a stable way to verify an article. With a DOI, the publisher just needs to let the DOI service know the new article URL, and all links will continue to work smoothly to take you to the article you're looking for. Otherwise, those URLs can undergo what is officially called link rot, and your article can lose traffic. The institutions managing DOIs for academic publishing are Crossref and DataCite. Just in general, Crossref tends to work more with publication data, journal articles, books, chapters. DataCite tends to work more with data sets, but both have and maintain and work with DOIs. When a publisher deposits a DOI and corresponding URL, they also add some information about the article that can help to identify it. This metadata about the article includes publication date, journal title, volume, issue, article title, and authors, but can also include things like abstracts, author affiliations, and ORCID IDs, references, open access license, funder name, and grant information, and more. This metadata can be made publicly available so that services like ScienceOpen can then query a DOI to access the extended information about it. You can see here, you can always search for a DOI on Crossref, for example. You can click on the metadata in a machine readable format. It's JSON, and you can see all of the different metadata, how it's tagged. For both publishers and authors, this metadata is really the business card for your article, as it were, and is really used by a wide range of services. You can see here example from this article, the abstract tagged in XML, the DOI, the type, a journal article, you can see title, but also here author, including affiliation. So what does your article then, what does this metadata then look like on ScienceOpen? ScienceOpen uses the Crossref metadata to enrich the article record. We show the references with DOIs, and you can see here. We track citations. So how our database is created, every time an article comes into the database that has references in it, we check our own database. If we've seen that before, we increase the citation index. If not, we do a lookup at Crossref or DataCite and try and pull in the publicly available metadata for that record. We use the abstract and keywords for search and for our similar article recommendation engine. We also work together with the company Altmetrics, who track online usage as an altmetric attention score. Here's an example there. And altmetric as well can only track articles with a DOI. So metadata that we have on ScienceOpen that doesn't have a DOI also doesn't have an altmetric score. For a discovery like environment like ScienceOpen, I would say the most important metadata fields beyond really basic ones like author, title, journal, etc., are abstract, references, open access license, keywords, affiliation, and funder information. Here's an example. So what does poor metadata look like on ScienceOpen? You can see in this example here, we have no references associated with this article. We have no affiliation information. We have no abstract here. We have very little information in general. On ScienceOpen, we use the available metadata to make a better search experience. So you can imagine articles with richer metadata, like the first one we looked at, have an advantage. Being able to filter for open access is really one key feature on the ScienceOpen platform. However, one piece of metadata that is often missing is a machine-readable open access license. You can see here in our search interface, you can add a filter and it asks you, do you want only open access content? You can say yes. You can say, oh, when you would like to see that, and then you can view all of the articles that have been flagged as open access. On ScienceOpen, however, we only flag articles as open access for articles with a CC BY machine-readable license tagged in the metadata. We do not try to guess if a journal is open access because we saw similar title in DOIJ, the Directory of Open Access Journals. We also don't try to send a bot to access the PDF, only to accidentally call something open access that was only freely available on that day because the paywall was down. And if an author really retains the copyright and publishes their article CC BY, we believe that that information should certainly be tagged in the article metadata and deposited with Crossref or DataCite. If your journal is open access and you have a look on ScienceOpen and you don't see an open access symbol on our discovery interface, then get in touch and we can try to discover with you at what step that metadata is missing. We've seen everything. A CC BY license printed in the PDF, for example, is not machine readable and will not be flagged as open access on ScienceOpen. So you can imagine that there's lots of things that can go wrong here, but actually having the computers be able to understand what they're allowed to do with your article and how they can attribute that article to the original version of record is really essential for open access publishers and authors alike. So this would be the first piece of metadata that I would flag and say really it's best to check that, particularly if you are publishing in or publishing hybrid journals. In that case, you really want to make sure that that individual article is correctly tagging the license in the metadata. But also for open access journals, we often see small open access publishers without all of the technical capability sometimes, or just say, well, everybody knows this is an open access journal. We just want to show you here that this is not always the case. Another example how metadata can make a difference. So this is a project from early 2020. The library at the University College London created an automated collection to gather together research from their faculty and students on COVID-19. However, articles that don't have any information in the affiliation section will not be included automatically. That information has to be deposited at Crossref or in another publicly available database to make sure that it's as widely distributed as possible. And you can imagine many similar projects like this, creating not author graphs around certain topics. If that affiliation information is missing, that can really make a lot of projects impossible. And you want to be involved in those kinds of projects. Probably, though, one of the most important and most powerful pieces of metadata in promoting your content is really an abstract. So we looked at the content in our topical collections to see whether having an abstract makes a difference in usage. And the answer is definitely yes. So articles with no abstract account for 30% of the content, but for less than 7% of the views in this collection on beetle research. Within a collection of the top articles, so all the articles that were viewed more than 50 times with abstracts have 25 times more views than those without. So if we just look at the top viewed content, we see ones with abstracts are viewed more often. The top article without an abstract has 60 views, as opposed to the top article with an abstract that has 1,400 views. It's similar if we look at open access. So we looked at this collection on open access articles on climate change and saw a similar result. In this context, it's likely that readers who are browsing content are more likely to click on an article with an abstract than one where they only have a title for orientation. So articles with no abstract accounted for 10% of the content, but for less than 1% of the views. The top article without an abstract had 93 views, and the top article with an abstract had 2,000 views. So just to give you an idea of the kind of difference that it can make. One way to check, what kind of metadata do we actually have as a publisher or as an author looking to publish with a particular publisher or in a particular journal? You can use the Crossref participation report to check your metadata health. And here you can see different categories. So you're wondering, why are there articles that have an open access license but don't have an abstract, for example? You can see here, these are all the fields that publishers can fill out. This is an example where a publisher had 47% of their records had references, which is great, but none of them were open. They didn't deposit ORCID IDs or license URLs or abstracts. So definitely some work that can still be done there. One thing, one initiative, if you're interested in getting involved in the open access, in getting abstracts more openly available, you can join the Initiative for Open Abstracts. Just to give you an idea, in September 2020, when they started this initiative, only 6.6% of all the works with a Crossref DOI and 8.3% of journal articles had abstracts available in Crossref. In orange are publishers who are supporting this initiative and making their abstracts freely available as part of the Crossref metadata, and I really hope that we're going to see that continue to grow, because I think as authors, you really can expect this from the publishers to make that little snippet of your work available. On ScienceOpen, as an author, if you can't if you don't have an abstract as part of your record, and there's no way to get the publisher to do that retroactively, we do allow you to enhance the visibility of your content within the platform by adding a lay summary or an abstract. You can also add keywords if they're missing. You can add a data availability statement, add a catchy image here. So we are always linking back to the publisher version of record, but we really are trying to make it easier for you to have a more complete record on the ScienceOpen platform. So let's talk about citations. Probably the most important form of currency for researchers and publishers alike. DOIs make it much easier to track citations. So if systems have to try and compare titles, authors, and publication dates, try and triangulate, make a best guess if a particular article is being cited without an identifier like a DOI, a lot of citations can get missed. If your article, chapter, book, poster, report, or conference paper does not have a DOI, you may be missing out on valuable citations. And if Google, Web of Science, Scopus, Dimensions, or ScienceOpen don't pick up on a citation to your work, does it exist? It's the classic question of a tree falling in the woods that no one hears. Each of these systems has their own citation count. Within ScienceOpen, as I said, when an article comes in, we analyze the references, we do a lookup in our database. If we've seen this article before, we increase the citation count. If not, we go on and try and find that article elsewhere. And this is pretty much the same process that all of these different systems also use. You can see that using these citations, tracking these citations can also be a very helpful discovery tool. So on ScienceOpen, if you click that link, you can sort all of those results by cited by count. You can explore how they've been used on the platform, see which are articles and books. So we really try to open up also that cited by list for exploration and discovery. The same also holds true for references and using references as a discovery tool. So here's an example of an article where we've gotten the metadata from Crossref, and the metadata contained references that were openly available, so ScienceOpen could add them to the platform. These references can then be used as a discovery tool. So again, I can search in those 53 references, sort by cited by count. I can also explore different content types, collections on the site, narrow by publisher and by journal. So we see often researchers on ScienceOpen using these reference lists as really a discovery tool and be able to sort and search and not just scroll through the list and eyeball them to see which ones you think might be relevant to you. One of the important players in getting more citations available is the Initiative for Open Citations. So this is actually even a little bit older than the Initiative for Open Abstracts. If you look at the work that they've done, as of January 2021, the fraction of publications with open references has grown from 1% when the initiative started to 83% out of the 53.6 million records with references deposited on Crossref. This is an amazing achievement. It's really also incredibly easy to make your references open. So you just have to write an email to support@crossref.org, explore the documentation at the Initiative for Open Citations, and just tell them you want your references to be open. But unfortunately, not all publishers are depositing references with Crossref. So that is also a first place to start. I often see in the participation reports publishers who say all of their references should be openly accessible, so 100% open references. The only problem is they've never deposited a single reference with Crossref. So that's one of the things that we also hope to get is more of those, more of the publishers also depositing references in the first place and then making them openly available. So you have your DOI, the persistent identifier for your article. The next step towards better metadata is the author ID, your ORCID. More and more publishers require an ORCID at the point of manuscript submission or publication, so you may have one already. ORCID is an identifier to allow each researcher to say themselves what publications they've actually published. So with an ORCID, you can really verify that you are the author. I myself, I've published a paper on Drosophila genetics and one about Goethe's Faust. No AI in the world is going to guess that those are by the same author. That's really work that the author has to do themselves. And to make sure that your authors are not assigned to a different author with the same name, get an ORCID. Once you have an ORCID, you can also add on your ORCID profile information such as biography, employment, education, grants, and more. When creating your ORCID, however, also be sure to use the DOIs of your publications so that they can be verified in systems such as ScienceOpen. We often see authors type in the title and date of their publications only to create errors that prevent aggregation with other systems. So computers are really never as smart as people want them to be. It's really much more efficient if you use ORCIDs, if you use DOIs in your ORCID account. And once you have an ORCID, you can really use that as a basis for your researcher profile and can link your ORCID to all of your other profiles that you have. And I would recommend really to young researchers, get your author name, your publication list out there as widely as possible. You should get credit for that work that you're doing. Author publication lists are also often used as discovery tools on ScienceOpen. You can see when somebody registers on ScienceOpen and links their ORCID to their account, then this really opens up a discovery space for other users to explore your articles, sort by altmetric score, sort by citations, and authors can then get analytics on how people are using their content on the ScienceOpen platform. So you can get some statistics about how often your publications are read or shared, etc. So I could talk about metadata all day, but I'm going to end here. My take-home message is really discoverability is about making sure that the machines can find your work and make sense of it. Discoverability, I think, is a little bit different than visibility. Discoverability is the basic nuts and bolts of making sure that all of the information about your work is as widely available to the machines as possible. I think then once you've taken that first step, there's a lot of extra things that you can do to increase the visibility. You can write blog posts, you can share your work on Twitter, you can add a lay summary on Kudos, you can start a discussion group on ResearchGate. There's a lot of things that will make a difference in how many people see and read and hopefully cite your work. But all of that will be very difficult to track, very difficult to take, to follow, to share across different platforms if you don't have the basics right. So if you don't have a DOI, if you don't have an ORCID, if you're if the metadata attached to your DOI is missing lots of essential information or sometimes is incorrect, we see errors that go through generations of citations on the database. So that would be my recommendation to you, is get the basics right and then go for it. Get your message out there as widely as possible. And as an aggregator of information, ScienceOpen will continue to open up, share, add to, and explore the context of scholarly research in support of open knowledge goals. So join us. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar. And now I would be really happy to answer any questions that you might have. So I see one question in the Q&A. Does an author have control regarding metadata on Crossref or only the institutions? On Crossref, really, it's only the institutions. So that's basically the publishers. The publishers are the ones who deposit the DOI and deposit that metadata on Crossref. Where authors do have some control is if you deposit a green open access author version on your institutional repository. When you do that, make sure you add as much metadata as possible and not think, oh, it's hard work, oh, it's going to take too long. This is really, institutional repositories are often used as well in generating and spreading metadata. But I will tell you the truth, among aggregators, institutional repositories are sometimes not so useful because authors don't add as rich of metadata as they could. So this is something that I would encourage everybody to think about. Like I said, if your publisher doesn't add abstracts to Crossref for whatever reason, you can still go on ScienceOpen and add a lay summary there, or add your abstract to your paper. You can also add lay summaries on Kudos. So you have some options to get that abstract information out there. And publishers love to hear from you. So if you don't have an abstract, I also encourage you to get in touch. There's another question in the chat. Why is there such a huge difference between Google Scholar citations and those on ScienceOpen? So you can imagine Google Scholar and Google in general is ginormous. We're a small startup in Berlin. So what we really want to use this citation information for is to help you with discovery. If I do a search on COVID-19, I think it's really helpful to be able to see what's the most talked about article, sort those results by altmetric score, or what's the article that's been cited by the most other researchers, sort by cited by, or what's the newest, maybe it's too new to have any citations or altmetric score. So those are 3 different sorting mechanisms that can give you some insight into the content. But we have 67 million article records and hundreds of millions of connections. But what we don't, but still there's a lot of research out there, and we don't have access to full text in a lot of cases, in most cases. So whenever an open access article comes into the system where we can analyze the references and do a lookup in our database and go to Crossref and pull in the publicly available metadata, we can do that. But if there are articles that don't have citations available to us, then we can't track those. Google has a lot of contracts with different publishers so that they have access to full text. The same goes for Web of Science, Scopus. So it's very much a question of how much access to those references do you have. I'm looking at the questions somebody's asking. Any webinar sessions on academic online discoverability techniques and tools in the future? Certainly, we would be happy to talk about online discoverability techniques and what platforms are out there. We know ScienceOpen the best, but there certainly are a number of free tools that you can use for your research if you are not associated with a library or your library doesn't have subscriptions to some of the more extensive tools such as Scopus or Web of Science. I mean, I think ScienceOpen is a great place to start, especially because of our interactive overlay, so you can recommend and share and like and interact with the articles on the platform. Other good platforms are Dimensions, the Lens, the Microsoft Research, Microsoft Knowledge Graph. I would have to look that up. Yeah. Other questions? Anybody? You can also raise your hand and I can let you ask your question. I see here another one in the chat. Outlines critical practice studies. I'm trying to read. Critical Practice Studies is an open access journal. I can only find a few of the articles in ScienceOpen. Can you explain why? The reason for that is basically, as I said, how we've been growing the platform is we aggregate full text open access content from a few central sources. So Cielo, Archive, the PubMed Central Open Access Data Subset, and almost all of the other content that's in the platform is either from our publisher customers that we work with directly, or it is has been cited. It's either been cited or it's been added as part of a researcher's profile, etc. So we are really happy to work with any journal to get their full set of content into the platform, and essentially that's also our business model. So we help publishers promote their full set of journal content. We help them improve their metadata. We can also provide full publishing services, and that all sort of embedded in this discovery environment. That's great. Microsoft Academic Search, thank you. I just had a brain freeze there. Somebody added that to the chat. Appreciate that. Thank you, Constantine. Any other questions that I can answer about ScienceOpen, about metadata in general, about your own articles or your own journals that you're publishing, editing? Somebody asked if they could write me an email about their journal on our platform. Absolutely. I'm going to type my email address into the box here. You can. It's just stephanie.dawson@scienceopen.com, and you can also as well write to info@scienceopen.com. And our team will get that. We would be very happy to look at your metadata for you. We offered at the beginning of the year a free metadata consultation. So if you would like to talk to our experts, then I'm happy to set up a meeting. Amy asked as well in the question and answer if ScienceOpen presents book metadata as well, and if these are allocated DOIs in Crossref. Yes, we do. We do show books and book chapters on ScienceOpen that have DOIs. So we started out as a journal database, but of course, journal articles cite books and book chapters all the time. So when we added the record type book and book chapter to the platform, we knew we had a pool of DOIs that had already been cited in the content that we had, that we were that we started working on and adding to the platform. By this point, we have, I think, 2 million book and book chapter records, approximately. So that's quite a bit. Those are really almost all things that have been cited, and that's why we're tracking them on ScienceOpen. So it's another real great reason to get actually DOIs for your books and book chapters, just because tracking citations used to be something that was almost entirely reserved for journal articles. It was really science articles. It was advanced technology to track citations, and for books, everybody thought it was too hard, and it is really hard. You'd think that books have an ISBN, so it should be pretty easy to match those citations, but of course, nobody cites a book ISBN in their reference list. Books are much more likely to not have DOIs or to just have text, title, author. There's lots of editions, there's lots of challenges around book citation tracking, but I still think that it's coming. Authors want it. Books are highly cited, and especially in the humanities, you definitely books count for much more than journal articles. So you definitely want to know how often your books and chapters are being cited. There's another question here. Any thoughts on blog articles? That's actually a good question. Blog articles are generally not assigned DOIs. So blog articles are generally not treated like academic outputs. But that said, there's a huge amount of of content on Crossref that are editorials and lots of other opinion type articles that are really not, research. That there's very little difference between in some magazines that have opinion articles that have a DOI and a blog post on WordPress. So I think it's something that might really start coming as more and more researchers really use their blog a lot to discuss research topics. So I would like to see blogs treated more seriously, at least the ones involved in scientific research. And one thing that you can do for that is you can just find a way to get DOIs for your blog posts. Zenodo might be a place to start with that, and then they'll be treated as pieces of the scholarly output. So there's another question. What do we think about BASE? Is it useful for discoverability? We have it listed in search databases in EBSCO. Yeah, BASE is, of course, also a fantastic platform that is doing a lot of that work of aggregating content. I think BASE is very useful for discoverability. ScienceOpen, we're doing something a little bit different because our main focus is really the interactive layer over top of our discovery environment. So allowing researchers to write a review of a preprint or write a review of a book, allowing people to recommend articles, to curate content into topical collections, allowing researchers to write comments, enhance their metadata on the ScienceOpen platform to create sort of attractive profiles of their research outputs. Those are some aspects that are unique to ScienceOpen as compared to BASE. Of course, BASE has a really strong database of content. Let me check the Q&A. Are there any other questions that I can answer for you? If we were all sitting in a room, I would really love to ask whether you are at this webinar more from the perspective as an author. So are you more interested in how you can promote your own articles, or if you're coming at this from a publisher perspective, so maybe library, society, university, publisher, or single journal editor, who are thinking about how you can increase the visibility for your journals. So, I see. Great. Thanks. That's true. I could have put together a poll. I'll just say I'm not good enough to actually write a poll while I'm talking to you guys. So we have authors, librarians, publishers, and editors, journals, editors and journal authors. And next time I'll have Jo Haveman as an assistant here, and she'll be responsible for our polling. Great. Well, thanks for joining today. I hope that I covered the topics that were of most interest to you. I really think the things to look out for is making sure you have an open access license tagged in the metadata, deposited at Crossref or DataCite, that you have abstracts openly available on all of your content, that you deposit references at Crossref and make them publicly available. You can imagine that it works just like Google works, right? The more links going to your content, probably the higher the chance that it might show up somewhere as a citing article. And if you're a small publisher, one of the best ways to get people's attention, with a new journal is to actually cite their papers and make sure that they see that you cited their papers, because people actually care about who cited their work. So every researcher is going to look at that list of like, ooh, who cited me? Ooh, I don't know this journal. Maybe I'll look it up. So that's one of the things that I think is really important as a publisher to get that data as widely available as possible. There's one more question. Can we backdate abstracts on ScienceOpen, or do they have to go through Crossref? One thing that we can do that I'm actually really proud of, we can actually now help publishers. They can add their abstracts on ScienceOpen for books or chapters or journal articles. So we have a enhanced metadata interface also for publishers, and then we can both have those abstracts available on our platform, and we can update those at Crossref. So we really believe that just making that kind of metadata available on Crossref or available on ScienceOpen really isn't enough. There's a long list of metadata affiliates who use the metadata from Crossref, and you really want each and every one of them to have access to that richer metadata that you've just created, because it takes time and effort. So like I said, we really are happy to help publishers improve their metadata on ScienceOpen, but we also really are happy to work with them to just we'll just deposit that at Crossref to make better Crossref records for everybody. And I think that's one way we all sort of work together in the scholarly infrastructure community and really share those kind of results so that we have a richer data set for everybody to work with. It's great for all startups trying to do something cool with this data.